Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the I Am 1-2 podcast with your host, Christopher Cohn. And with me always is my great co-pilot and producer, Mr. Dan the Man, across from me here. Say hello, Dan.
How's everybody doing out there?
Hells to the yes. Welcome back. We're so glad you're with us. If this is your first time hitting the I Am 1-2 podcast, we are a recovery podcast from whatever ails you. We start out talking about alcohol and drugs in some other episodes, and then we try to expand them. Kind of what we're doing is maybe an episode 1 week more focused on alcoholics and addicts, and then another episode focused on the general population and just the stuff we have to deal with as human beings nowadays in this modern world, and somehow be happy. So I hope you find this useful. We offer this for free. And the format of our program is we will have a topic that I will do an edumacation on, as I call it, with my patients. And then we're going to have a little back and forth, me and Dan on the topic. And then we'll answer questions from you, the listeners. So please send us your questions every week. They will be completely 100% anonymous, and we will address any issue you have going on in your life. It's free therapy, basically. Send it to IAM12, the word recovery, podcast at gmail.com. That's IAM12 recovery podcast at IAM12. Or IAM12 recovery at podcast. No, not podcast. Back up. Send your questions to IAM12 recovery at gmail.com. Just IAM12 recovery. See, I got it right, and the universe is telling me I got it right that time. IAM12 recovery at gmail.com. And we would love to address your questions every week, whatever you want to talk about, whatever we can help you with. My background, if you're just joining us, is I am a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor, the highest level of credentialing in the field of addiction you can get in the state of Kentucky. I've been in practice about 22 years and at multiple facilities, inpatient and outpatient. And I also have 40 years of recovery, and I also grew up as an alcoholic in an alcoholic family. So, as I jokingly say, I don't know what karma I earned from a last lifetime, but I feel like I've paid it in this one and continue to pay it. But once you get past the other side of the suffering part of our disease, it's a pretty damn good life. And most people in recovery would say that they're grateful that they actually were given this opportunity for this new path, which only comes out of pain. I didn't set up the rules. I just report them. Higher power, whatever it is, the universe, the laws of nature, is that we have to suffer. We have to go through that dark night of the soul and hit bottom before us human beings will do something different. And Lord, do I see that every day in my group. The amount of pain and suffering that people will endure not to change is extraordinary. So hopefully you won't be one of those people, and that we can provide you some tools to help you make some positive changes in your own life. We just got through the 4th of July here, and my good friend Dan went back up to the Civil War battlefields in Pennsylvania, and I really admire him taking that kind of a day trip. He was there 2 days, and but he felt compelled and drawn and got a chance to be with his favorite park ranger, who's all over YouTube. I won't steal your thunder, but anything quick you want to say on that about how that was for you?
It was just an epic day. I don't know if everybody, it's impossible really to explain to somebody, but sometimes when you're like studying something the way I was, and I went up there and something was left open, there was like some unfinished business somehow or another, and I went back and I got exactly what I needed on that second trip. So it was just one of those days when you laid your head down at the end of the night. It was like, wow, what a day. So yeah, I had a great time.
I admire that. That's what recovery is all about, is new adventures and saying yes to the universe, which is hard for us humans because we get stuck in our routines and we get a little anxiety about doing new things with new people. But usually in recovery, if you just go, you'll come back saying, that was awesome. Yeah. I'm really glad I went.
Yeah, the first trip was great too, but there was something, and I answered the universe and went back and got the icing on top.
The key phrase you said that stuck out to me as your sponsor is when you said, something's calling me.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, folks, if you have something calling you, check it out. There's a message there. There's something there waiting for you that's good. Universe is definitely trying to guide you.
Yeah, I have learned to listen to that.
Yeah, it's hard, though, right?
It is hard.
I've heard people call it, and I agree 100%. I think our intuition is our sixth sense.
Yeah.
I heard a neuroscientist talking about, we think about too much as modern humans, but we survived by our gut. He says if you're out in the wild, you won't survive by your wits. You'll survive by your gut going, danger, you better run.
Yeah.
You're about to be eaten by a dinosaur. But we've lost touch with that because we have all these devices and toys and distractions. I always love that story about the floods, typhoon. What is it where it goes out? Tsunami. The tsunami, where they talked about how all the animals sensed something was wrong, and they went up all to the mountaintops and higher ground, and then when the human beings walked towards the shore and said, "What's going on?"
Stood on the beach
and said, "This is amazing. Look at all this extra beach." And then they all died. I don't mean to make light of that. Please don't misunderstand me, but literally we've lost so much to recover, which is basically the tone and the thrust of this podcast, to recover that original part of ourselves that got ruined by this world, which is today's topic. Today we're going to talk all about spirituality, and we're going to talk about the fact that your spirituality was stolen from you at an early age without your approval, without your knowing it, and it's affected you for the rest of your life. I personally believe this to be one of the biggest ails or demons or plagues of society today, is that people have lost their spirituality because someone else ruined it for them. And so they've just divorced themselves from anything else that might work for them based on they just didn't like what one person or 10 people or whoever it was in your past did this to you. And I will go on record and teach you today that if you're not doing any kind of inventory work to investigate what you have in your computer banks about what everybody else has taught you about God, you do not have your own version of God. You have someone else's conception of a higher power. So we will address that today. So let's start from the beginning, because, in AA, we get this approach that Bill Wilson figured out, that alcoholics were going to need a spiritual approach to their disease. A lot of people are confused about that and say, well, why are we talking about spirituality when they come to my group when they just want to get out of trouble with the law? And I'm like, well, actually, your soul is in disorder right now. Your spirit is going against itself sideways. Basically what's happened is you have a certain set of values, you have a certain set of beliefs, and you want to operate by those because that's what makes you feel good inside. But when you put chemicals into your body, that causes you to do other values and other things that you don't agree with, and that leads to guilt and shame, and that creates a soul that is in conflict with itself. You're in major distress. All of my patients will report anxiety and depression. They'll get a diagnosis for it because insurance can get paid for that, and we can get paid for that. But that might not be the case. It might be just you have a guilty soul. You have a dirty soul. That's why you can't sleep at night. Your karma is keeping you awake. So that's why Bill was a genius to figure out we needed a spiritual approach. Now, as soon as he said that, and as soon as he brought that word God into the discussion, people flip out and they think, "Oh, AA is religious." And I'm like, the furthest thing from it, folks. I mean, I jokingly say, if you can show me where there's a church where I can stand up and tell them F your God and F you people and F all this shit going on here, and then they all look at me and smile and clap and say, "Keep coming back. We love you. You're going to be okay. We're going to love you too. You can love yourself." That's not going to happen in most faiths, period. They're going to kick you out the door, pal. So there's one big difference. But I was given a list a long time ago. I don't think it was in treatment. It might have been in my training for social work, where they had it broken down, 10 different things between religion and spirituality. And I was trying to research to find something that was really concise, close to this. So here's 6 things that I found that I really think are kind of eye-opening about how different spirituality and religion are from each other. So with spirituality, there are no rules. Everybody knows if you go to a church, there's doctrine, there's dogma, and there's certain rules that you have to abide by. Get up and do your communion, be baptized, whatever it might be. And if you don't do that, you will be stigmatized in the community because you're not going along with what the group does. That's another one about spirituality. Spirituality is your own individual journey. It's not about a group. So that's number one. There's no rules in your own spirituality. Okay? You don't have to go to church. You don't have to go read these books. You go by your heart, really. You go by what your soul is interested in, and you listen to that. Spirituality is based only on love. It does not have fear. Okay? How many religions have a bent to it where they tell you on one hand Jesus loves you, but he's going to kick the ever-loving shit out of you if you fuck up? I can't tell you how many times I heard that as a child. And even as a child, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. How can a being be unconditionally loving and punish you? And I'm always fascinated too, because I do know something about this from my training and the teachers I've had, that Jesus basically was put to death because he wiped the Old Testament off the table. Do you understand? The Pharisees did not like that threat to their power. And he came out. You know how he did it? This is what my teacher told me. He said 2 words, our Father. The entire Old Testament has this despot, dictator, mean, vengeful God, eye for an eye, going to get you, hit you with a lightning bolt. And Jesus said, it's your parent. It's your cosmic parent that loves the hell out of you. That's it. And they put him to death for that, folks, because we don't want to hear that. We tend to be gravitated towards the mean God. It's really odd, but that's what we do. So again, spirituality is only based on love. There are no fear teachings on the spiritual path. No hell, no damnation, no original sin. I don't mean to offend anybody. If that's your belief, I respect that. But if you want to be spiritual, that is not what spirituality is. That's religion. Religion tells you what the truth is. Spirituality allows you to discover it for yourself. I love that. I believe that it's the greatest gift we have as human beings, is this right to go on our individual journey to discover what life means to me. Who am I in relation to this planet, to my fellows? What kind of character do I want to represent? What values do I want to live by? And that's my personal journey. I don't need some person in a pulpit. And I really don't need some politician on the freaking campaign stump telling me what my morals need to be. I go on that journey, and I will make mistakes to learn that. That is the human journey. The entire human journey is I'm going to screw things up to learn what works for me and what I don't agree with. You can have another person tell you all the day long, this is a sin, this is a sin, this is a sin. But if you don't feel that in your heart and soul, it won't ring true. It will not be truth. But if I go out and I do something that violates what I really believe, I'm going to be hurt. I'm going to have that inner conflict where it's going to, you know, ever do anything that you felt really bad about later, and then you went to a group of people, like a party, and you felt like everybody knew what you did? I mean, something really dark and disgusting, and it's like you can't look people in the eye because you're afraid they'll know. They'll know what I just did. That's the conflict. And it takes you away from people, and it creates separation. And as I've been taught, the word hell has a German root, which means to build a wall around. Don't preach to me about burning hells and all that. I will tell you, hell is when you're isolated from your peers and your loved ones because of guilt and shame. That is true hell. All right, religion will tell you the truth. Spirituality allows you to discover it for yourself. Number 4, religion tends to separate. I don't think that's their intention. That's the teachings. That's some of the dogma. Religion separates. Spirituality unites. I do not believe anyone can point to one war that man has had over spirituality. And yet we all can point to hundreds of conflicts that the human race has been involved in related to religion, correct? So, again, this is just a difference. We're not trying to judge it, say good or bad. I'm just trying to point out we're talking about a completely different thing besides when people come in the program and think we're talking about religion in recovery. Number 5, the difference between karma and punishment. This is a vital difference, and I see that it's a lacking part in a lot of people's spirituality who go to church. This belief that I can be a complete jerk the entire week and screw my fellow man over anywhere and anyhow I can, because it's just business. But as long as I go to church on Sunday and I repent, then I'm forgiven. People do not understand that's not the way the universe works. You get karma. You have this thing following you around with a ledger going, yep, you did that. Yep, you did that. No, that was good. You did that. Yep. And then you wonder why you don't feel good, or why your life is not going well, or why you seem stuck. It's because you are not putting out good energy, man. So again, spirituality teaches about karma. And I think if we did that in the planet, I think people would think twice before they screwed over their brother. If they truly believed what Jesus himself taught, grain for grain, it will be repaid to you. Do you know how small a grain is, folks? That's the smallest little thing you put out there in the universe. That's what you're going to get back from life. We're not taught that in Western religion. We're taught about, oh, just say Hail Marys, blah, 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 and you're fine. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. It does not teach people how to be better people, okay? But I do know that if I'm operating according to karma, it's sort of like a challenge that, well, I don't want to screw up my future, and I definitely don't want to screw up another life if there is life after this life, so I better operate like a decent human being in this one. And they also talk about the law of attraction in spirituality, which is as you put out, that's what you receive. And then the last one, 6, spirituality allows you to walk your own path. It's not going to be defined for you. I remember when I was growing up in my church, that was very clear. You had to go through training and then all this and then all this, and you had to do this, and it was very specific what you could do. They didn't allow me the opportunity to walk my own path. And in fact, in my particular upbringing, not saying all churches like this is just my story, that if I would ask questions, I would be punished. I would be stigmatized. I would be told, just believe, shut up, don't ask questions. That is not the way of spirituality. Spirituality is about ask every question you have. Every question you have is a wonderful gift to learn something new. So ask it. Be filled with wonder. Be filled with questions. Try new things. My old spiritual teacher used to say the church told her, stay on the path, don't look right, don't look left. It's works of the devil for sure. Stay straight. The true path is narrow, right? So again, I am not trying to downgrade the approach of religion. I'm trying to propose to you that we're talking about two different animals. Now, how did they get combined? Well, the way it was explained to me is a long time ago, there was this cave person who was hunting a rabbit, and he was starving, and he was at the point where he was going to die if he didn't nail this food. And he finally hit it with a rock and killed it. And he was so hungry, he just shoved it in his mouth without taking the fur off or cleaning it or anything, just ate to save his life. And at the minute that that food hit his system and life started to return to him, if he happened to look up and see a beautiful sunset at that moment, he may have offered up a small prayer of, thank you. That is the heart of spirituality. It's the approach that I am not alone in this world, that there are powers beyond my understanding that are bigger than me, powers that Einstein himself began to believe in through his study of science, powers that the quantum physicists, shout out to my good friend Catherine, believe that we don't know nothing, and they call this thing the Higgs particle, the God particle. And there's a lot we don't understand. Side note, I heard a speaker talking about humans can only see 0.0001% of all light. Humans can only hear 0.0001 blah, blah, blah of hearing. We don't even hear as good as your dog does. We don't see as good as your cat does. Yet we walk around believing we know everything, don't we? Ego. So spirituality is this humility that I am working in partnership with nature. And if we all had this on our planet, we wouldn't be destroying our home. There would be a consciousness that if I'm going to drive a car that gets 10 miles to the gallon or pollute a river, whatever it is, there would at least be a consciousness like, ooh, I'm hurting myself if I hurt this because this turns into my kids drinking water downstream. We don't do that in America. We're very separate and isolated. We think we're outside nature. Spirituality is completely different. We are all one. This is all part of the great universe, all part of the great plan. And you know what you get out of that? You eliminate fear because you don't feel completely alone against a hostile universe, which is how I always felt when I was using. I always felt like I was in battle with life. I was at war with it, if you want my honest opinion. But that was because of my upbringing. So let's go back to that a little bit and explain some of that. When I say that your spirituality has been stolen from you, I'm presenting to you the fact that since you were in the womb, and there is a lot of prevailing new research talking about the influence to the fetus from what the mother is exposed to, stress-wise, cortisol levels, quiet or loud. You know, some parents will play music like Mozart, thinking it will develop the baby's brain quicker. And there is some scientific basis for this. We don't really understand it fully. But it is a formed life form taking place. So since you were in the womb, you've been receiving all these messages from every other human being that was around you about what God was. And I got bad news for you. None of them know. Not one of them can say with 100% of certitude that I was there, I saw it, here's the proof, that's the answer. But they will say that. They will try to claim that, but none of them can do that. So as a computer bank, which is what our minds are, it's just this great computer with a big old hard drive, it begins filling up with all this software. And some of that software contains viruses. And some of those viruses get into the whole system. And if you were affected by someone that you really did not like, as I was, or you were traumatized by your faith institution, as I was. By the way, I didn't get to decide which church I was going to as a child. They said, get in the car, dress up, we're going. And that happened to a lot of us. I get a lot of patients who say they didn't have anything. And I still point out to them, that's still your parents determining what your spirituality was going to be. That was not decided by you. So let's get that on the same page with that. You did not decide your own path. You can do this now, after this podcast, as an adult. That is the gift I am offering you today, but you did not have that choice as a child to say, no, I'm not going. I would have been whooped if I hadn't gone to church. And unfortunately, the trauma to me in my church is they taught me to fear God. And I consider that a sin. I think that's the biggest sin a person can commit, to teach a child about fear, about their creator. They taught me guilt. I learned to be ashamed of myself. I learned to be ashamed and afraid of the naked body, right? Adam and Eve were ashamed when she ate from the fruit of knowledge because they didn't have clothes on. And worst of all, in my opinion today, they taught me how to lie. I remember the day it happened. As a child, I was not trained to lie. But I was in second grade, I think, and I was in a Catholic elementary school, and this was back in the 60s when the nuns weren't very nice. I'm not saying they're all like that, and it's certainly changed since the old days. But those of you who went to a school of certain faiths back then, children were beat. They were abused. People should be in prison for it. And I'm not talking about sexual abuse. I'm just talking about discipline, things you should not do to a child, hurting them. And we had to go do confession in grade school, and I had nothing to confess. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't even stolen any cookies at that point. I'm 5 years old. I made something up as I was sitting there because I thought this was a test. I had to tell this man something. So I walked in that little box, scared to death. Screen goes up, and I made something up that I did. And he said, "Are you sorry? Do you repent?" And I said what I was told to say. And I went off and said my Hail Marys and prayers. How is that good? But that's what my experience was in terms of trauma with my upbringing. I feel like they stole my ability to just be on the path to figure it out for myself. They put a lot of negative things in my way that I had to clear out. And by the time I came to AA and I'm looking on the wall and they got God on the wall, I'm ready to throw a bomb at that thing. I'm going to torch this building because of my anger and resentment against that issue. Not from me, from what other people did to me. Okay? So, as you're going on this path, how many influences do you think you've had about what God is? We see it in movies, we see it in TV, we see it in all the different religions, we see it on the news with wars. You know, people justifying war in the name of God. How does that make sense? I mean, all the conflicted messages, and yet none of that has to do with your own personal journey about going out and figuring out for yourself, what do I really think about this? What do I really believe? What feels right to my gut and my intuition? Okay? So we're given that opportunity in spirituality in 12-step recovery. It's handed to us. It's probably the greatest gift. Dan and I go back and forth on this joke about the greatest gift of recovery is this, the greatest recovery is this, because there's so much stuff you get. But I have figured it out, Dan. I have figured out the answer. The answer is allowing me to walk a spiritual path through this life rather than being a zombie, material chasing, my life doesn't really have any more meaning than my bank account person out there. And I'm not judging people, but I'm telling you, this is what you see. They are not happy unless they're making money or getting more items. And that is not true happiness. And AA took me and said, no. You can walk this deeper path. You know, the old saying, the unexamined life is not worth living. And I'm telling you, most people are not taking the time to do a God inventory. Most people are not taking the time to spend hours talking to their sponsor about God, which I used to do at the top of the old Memorial Stadium in Minneapolis before they took it down. We would go there at night and sit the top row and just talk in the dark to each other. And that gift of going on that journey has changed it's given me a much deeper and more enriching experience of life along the way. Always having that awareness that there's more going on than I can see. always walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe, your higher power creator, that I'm not alone and that there's more going on. If I'm aware and I'm present for it, I will see things happen in my day that I would have missed if I was preoccupied with listening to the radio and listening to my cell phone and too distracted. Absolutely would have missed. I would have missed that juicy moment of my day where the universe kind of winks at you and says, hey, I'm here. You're not alone. And this morning on the way to work, I hit every freaking green light. I was astounded. I just started laughing. I said, all right, God, let's see how far you want to keep this going. And he turned another one green and then another one green. And I was like, this is just ridiculous. I hit every red light usually. It's just the way the roads are mapped. They have the red light system's not set up very well. But today, smooth as butter, man. And it's just fun. It's fun. It's more fun to walk through life like that everything has meaning versus nothing means nothing. And if you are an addict or an alcoholic out there, I will tell you that's the biggest justification to stay sick and die from this disease that I used beyond every other excuse I ever used. If life means nothing, let's party as hard as we can. Let's have as much fun and screw as many people as we can and just get what I want and then leave a pretty corpse at 30. That's the only goal I had at 22 when I hit my treatment center. Pretty damn limited, right? But if nothing means nothing, then why not? However, AA comes along with their spirituality and says, well, what if everything means everything? What if there is something in everything? What if every little move you make throughout the day does affect the fate of your soul? Does affect your future, your opportunity to get a new job, your opportunity to draw a loving, great partner to you instead of an abusive, psychotic partner to you? What if everything you're putting out matters? And that's a whole different story. That's not about preaching about hell and going to hell. That never stopped me. But when I'm thinking like, oh, this is like actually handicapping myself. This means I will not have the stellar life I want, and I may not get to be able to reach my dreams because I'm being a dick. You see? But nothing means nothing. I don't care what happens. Why should I care? I'm just going to die. So again, I always present to my sponsees, this is a 50-50 proposition since we're all going to have this experience and we're all going to go on it alone. This is guaranteed. I'm always amazed at addicts and alcoholics in our group when they experience a death. It's almost like it's the first time they ever heard about it. I don't know. Maybe I'm more realistic, more pragmatic, but I'm like, we're all going to die. That's just part of the deal. You have to accept that if you want to be here. And you're all going to do it alone. No matter how many people are around you, you're going to go on this journey alone to find out what nobody else knows yet. This is your own adventure, I heard a guy say yesterday, to go and discover what's next. Okay? But I don't want to leave this world without completing all the good things I wanted to achieve, and I don't want to take all that stuff into the next. And that's having that mindset that everything means everything, rather than nothing means nothing. So I come into my program, and like I said, I was very closed off, and I had to go through a lot of work. Today we have a tool called a God inventory, and it's going to be included in this book I'm finishing for fall called the I Am 1-2 book. And this will be a book for everybody in recovery. So even if you don't have an ism, you will be welcome to work the 12 steps because we have learned they work for everybody. And what I want to invite you to do today to start, though, is go on this journey to start asking yourself, what do these things mean to me? Now, Bill writes an entire chapter called The We Agnostics, chapter 4 of the big book. And I got to tell you, that's the one line that has always stood out to me as probably the most profound instruction he gives in there. He says, instead of arguing with what everybody else believes and putting down what everybody else believes and judging it, why don't you just stop and ask yourself, what does this mean to me? What do I think about a higher power? What do I think about the universe and us being connected? What do I think about the idea that there might be an afterlife? What do I think about my purpose in this planet? What do I think about meaning to my life? These are pretty profound questions, right? And I was blessed because the first 3 years of my sobriety, I did not have a car. So if you want to go somewhere, I'm either asking for a ride if it's too far away or I'm huffing it. And I've got my little Walkman with my little tape player and my little headphones on in 1984, and I'm walking, and it gave me time to think. And it came a point where I would call them walkabouts because I would just allow myself to walk in whatever direction I wanted to go in and see where it took me, just see where my feet took me. And I had the music playing, and it gave me a lot of time to contemplate, what does this mean to me? Where am I at with my life? Where do I want to go? Why is this happening? What can I change? Those kind of major ass questions. Then I was taught about journaling. And my sponsor said it's taking out the trash. He says you would never cook a highly odorous food in your house and leave it in your trash can in the house to stink your whole house up by overnight. Nobody does that. But we will watch all that crap on TV, including the news, and go right to bed and wonder why we're not sleeping well. We're not dumping any of that stuff out. We're not taking the trash out. And that's what he told me. He said, if you would spend some time, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, however long you want to do, and just write whatever's on your mind before you go to bed, you will sleep like a baby. So there's a gift for all my new people in new recovery. If you are not sleeping, I promise this works. And this journal is yours. The main rule being nobody else can get access to it. You cannot allow anybody to see it. It will cramp what you need to write. You need to have total freedom to write whatever's on your mind. And this is a discipline you're going to make for yourself that I'm going to make a commitment to do this. So some days I had nothing to write. So I just drew a cartoon. And some days, it must not have been a good day. I look at the whole page and it says F, 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 and the whole page was filled with that. So I look at that one now, and I can't throw away my first journal. To me, it's a sacred document that got me through that dark night of early recovery. But what the journal did is it gave me a chance to reflect. Writing with an instrument, not with your computer, is a totally different experience, which is why we encourage people to do inventory with a pen. If you did inventory on your phone or with a computer, with a word processor, you did not get the same experience. There is something very sacred about making you slow down to write. And when you're free writing with your hand in your journal, things will come out that will just jump off the page at you. And I started making connections about why do I feel so antagonistic towards this higher power stuff. Every single person that comes into the group has a certain chip on their shoulder with the spirituality. Bill Wilson was a genius when he called them blocks. These are other people who put some crap in between you and your higher power, because when you were a kid, you loved your higher power. You thought it was awesome. And I mean, you'll rarely find a kid under 5 that doesn't have a positive view of God. If they don't, they've been damaged by somebody at an early age. But then after that, what happened to change you? And it gave me time to write that out and sort of evaluate, wow, what happened to me? What happened to me? Now, as this was occurring, and I was learning techniques like saying yes to the universe, because instead, Christopher's doing this. And some of you all out there may be like this. This is what I was doing when you come at me with your spirituality. I'm like, what is this bull crap? And I was picking you apart before 2 words were out of your mouth, man. I was judging you mercilessly. And I'm philosophical. I'm beating you to death in my mind, winning these debates about where you're wrong and I'm right. And I learned about, dude, that is not a way to welcome new stuff in. You gotta welcome it. You gotta say yes. You gotta try new things. You have to take risks. So let me tell you a quick story about where I started, because this changed my whole life, and I was able to find my greatest spiritual teacher in my path by being open and saying yes, where normally I would have said ixnay on the chance I'm not doing it. All right, so I was in my home group, and there was this guy named Mike D. You ever have that guy in your home group when you're in early recovery and you feel like a complete piece of junk, and you're looking across at this guy who's so put together, and so fucking, he's tan, he's wearing this perfect leather Crocodile Dundee brown coat, and he's dressed to the nines, and his hair is perfect, and he's driving a cherry 1964 Cadillac parked out on the curb. And I hated this. Because every single woman in the group was going to him, and I was sitting over there going, you. And he was happy. This is what stuck in my claw the most. It wasn't his success. It was that grin on his face that he looked like he was having a good time. He just had a little bemused grin and a little bit of a mischievous character where he's just kind of looking around, having fun. And I was like, man, that guy's got something. He's got something. But my ego's like, I'm not talking to him. Screw that guy, man. I hate that guy. Well, behold, somehow, I didn't even know how it happened. I've forgotten, but he ended up giving me rides home from the meeting. Higher power stuff is what I think. And we had a mutual friend who he ended up dating, so they're in the front seat, I'm in the back seat, and he had a great sense of humor. And he would go park at my apartment, and we would just sit in there and make jokes for 3 hours on all kinds of stuff, and just raw ass humor, recovery humor, and just laugh our butts off. And we got to know each other. And so those guards were coming down a little bit, and eventually I got the courage to ask him, so what is this deal? I know you're doing something beyond this program. I can see it. What do you got? Because you're in early recovery too. He's only 2 or 3 years sober. So what do you got that's something different than what I'm seeing around here? And he wouldn't tell me. And I was like, oh, you son of a gun. Because he knows that little technique. If you don't tell him, you're kind of pulling him along like Dan does. Come with me. I got you. Come with me. A little bit long. So he's like doing that deal to me to pull me along. And eventually he told me, he says, well, I go to this group. It's a spirituality group. There's really no rules. A great teacher, and you're more than welcome to come with us on Sunday and check it out. And I heard the word Sunday, and I was like, I know what that is. That's that religion stuff. And they're going to get me in there and shave my head and make me drink the Kool-Aid. And I had all the walls up, man. But I was also hungry. And I was hungry enough to take a risk where I eventually said, all right, I'll go with, and plus, if you have somebody that makes it easier because you're going with somebody you trust or somebody you like, it makes it a lot. And I went with him and his girlfriend. She's a friend of mine. And so it made it a lot easier. I had a spiritual awakening in that first service. And I know it sounds cliche, stereotypical, maybe even goofy to you. I really don't care. But during the service, they turn the lights down, and then they all get up and they put their arms around each other and they sing Kumbaya, which translated means come by here for the Lord. It's I believe it's African in origin. And, it's a very stereotypical 80s new age. Everybody makes fun of that stuff, and I did too. But I'm sitting here feeling that fellowship and that love unconditionally and that inviting the Spirit to come be with us. Whatever that is, that's the problem. As people try to define it, I'll address that towards the end. And man, I'm telling you, it was like uncanny. The tears were streaming like rivers down my eyes. And I was embarrassed trying to hold it back and trying to maintain. And I was like, what is happening to me? I'm actually feeling something. And I was feeling that closeness with my Creator that I think I felt as a child before they stole it from me. I think I was grieving, now that I look back on it, of what I had lost. That innocent, not thinking, gut belief and trust in a power greater than me. Not words, actions. And I just feel like there's so many souls out there walking around with that and they don't even know it. They think they're making up their own mind that, I'm choosing not to believe, or I'm choosing that I'm an atheist or an agnostic, or I'm choosing, and I'm like saying, no, not really. If you've not got in there to do deep surgery with a God inventory and had a sponsor to help walk you through this third step we have, you've not really done the work to investigate what you believe. You think you know what you believe, but you haven't done the work to actually write down and start investigating. You've done a surface investigation. You've not done a deep dive. And the more I did the deep dive, the more I realized that, people come at me today. I say that today as a euphemism, but just currently, whatever. You get somebody comes in and says, do you believe in Jesus? And I'm just like, oh, you're out of your fucking mind, dude. I always wanted to say this, but didn't have the words back then, that Jesus is just all right with me, bro. Just like the Dewey brothers. He was a great teacher, did great things. Very few people can argue with that. That, okay, historically, it looks like he was here. Historically, it looks like he had some good teachings. And historically, he tried to do good. Nobody can argue with that shit, whether you believe in Christianity or not. Whether you believe in the redemption and the resurrection or not. Doesn't even matter. Most people can agree on that. So when people come in with that, I'm just like, I never had a problem with Jesus. Even when I was a kid and I went to church and I saw pictures of him with the little animals and the butterflies, and he looked like a friendly dude. And I was like, I was fine until my church taught me everything else. Is that not a crime against humanity? Is that not the responsibility and cause of most of the wars we've had? Is that not the indictment and guilty party of all the deaths of people who have been Spanish Inquisitioned, people, tribes that have been conquered by the colonialism, believe or die? Think about that, folks. That is man doing that. And Bill Wilson addresses that when he talks about the wars and the chicanery, which means trickery. I had to look it up. That man has done, we blame God for, but it's just men and women doing this stuff, guys. So if I can separate myself from all their junk and what they believe, I can then begin to go on the journey of, okay, what does this mean to me? And it's the most valuable gift you're going to have in this lifetime. I can promise you that. So after that, started going regularly. I met this teacher named Marion who changed my whole life. Her approach was Christian Science. And the science is like Emmett Fox. If you want to look him up, he's an amazing writer, Emmett Fox. Apparently, Emmett Fox was in town at Carnegie Hall when Bill was writing the big book, and they went to see him. And many of his phrases, like spirit of the universe, creative intelligence, Bill stole that from Emmett Fox. So it's in the big book for you big book thumpers out there. And it's often recommended. They were reading that book while people were getting sober. It's often recommended as almost a piece of AA literature, even though it isn't approved. It was used a lot for the original people getting sober. And I'm reading this and I'm like, wow, I got sold a bill of goods. Nobody really explained to me what Jesus was saying. I'll give you one example. When my teacher said, okay, first off, if you hear water anywhere in the Bible or any of the teachings, it means life. Why? Because they lived in a desert, dummy. Now, I'm a smart guy, but somehow I had not connected that because nobody told me that. Everything was an allegory. Everything was a parable, was a story, because that's the only way he could reach these dumber than dirt people. You know, I'm sure you're walking through this earth like I do sometimes, thinking people are dumber than dirt, but they're actually way smarter than they used to be because we have TV and we have internet. People know more than they ever did. But back when they were just farmers and sheep herders and fishermen, they were dumber than crap. But what they could relate to, does the crop grow this way? Do you need water to grow the crop? I can relate to that. And so he used, brilliant teacher, approaching the student where they're at, communications, terms that they would understand. Right? But if you don't get that, then you take the thing literally and you miss the whole point of what's being said. So this flipped me on my ear. Even the Lord's Prayer, when you see Emmett Fox break that down, according to him, this was the one document that Jesus felt like he knew was going to last the test of time. It was going to be the one document that we could say directly came from him, right? Other people wrote the Gospels. So we don't know that for sure. But the historians have said, no, this was his creation. This is what he said. And everything in there, if you go and read that section in a sermon, it's the book, The Sermon on the Mount. And he breaks down the Lord's Prayer in one section. It's astounding what it really means. And I'll go to meetings and I'll hear people rattle it off and they're not stopping to think about any word of what anything means. They're just saying it because they're supposed to, which is what I used to do. And that, again, is what spirituality is all about. It has deeper meaning for you. You're doing it because you can feel it. You're not doing it because somebody else told you and you're just supposed to get up and say the prayer. But, by the way, I was so against all of this, I didn't say the Lord's Prayer for the first year of my recovery. So if it can work for me to change, I'm telling you. But since then, I won't give you the full boring details, but I've been on so many amazing journeys, spending 10 days with the Dalai Lama, being able to be on a recording project with the monks from Tibet, as well as the people down at Gethsemane, the monastery, hearing down the Trappist monks here at Gethsemane. There was an artist in town who was blending Gregorian chant with Tibetan chant. Wow. And we recorded in Mammoth Cave that had never been allowed before. They don't want anybody in there to have the stalactites and stalagmites falling down. I was getting confused which one grows up, which one grows down. And then we recorded at the monastery, and then we recorded at a studio, at a Zen temple in the middle of Kentucky, which I had no idea there was a Zen temple in the middle of Kentucky. But you go on these journeys and you just learn all this stuff and you're just like, my world is so small and my belief system is so tiny. And the Buddhists have a saying for that as well. It's always been one of my favorite sayings is, you know, the universe is far too large to hold in the teacup of your mind. So stop trying to figure it out. So I told you we'd address that at the end. Let me address that, trying to define what God is. If you're in our program and you read the big book, Bill says it was impossible to define or comprehend what that word God means or what it is. Impossible, folks. So if you're on that track, it's kind of like trying to understand alcoholism, and I warn people, you're way off track. This is a cunning, baffling, and powerful disease. Stop trying to figure it out. It's going to do what it does. When it comes to the ways of the universe, it's much better to experience them than it is to try and approach it intellectually. When we have people who are going through the steps and they're trying to question everything, you have to tell them to shut off their mind. You have to say, dude, go on the journey. Just feel. Just experience. See what happens. The more you talk, the more you analyze, you're going to kill the experience. And you won't get your awakening. Why does this work? And why am I doing inventory? And why? Shut up. But stop trying to define what it is. You know, people will often ask me that, do you believe in God, or do you go to church? And I'm like, well, I can't even relate to those questions anymore. I don't mean that I'm any better or off on some far mountaintop or anything like that. I just mean like they don't make any sense to me anymore. I can tell you what I know. I can tell you what I've experienced. That's why I know it. I have directly experienced this. There is a power available. I don't care if you call it God, the Force from Star Wars, or electricity. But there is a freaking power that exists when I plug in my intention and I get I'm doing the right thing in my life and I'm opening up that channel and I'm working in partnership because I'm where I'm supposed to be and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. My higher power shows up through that power and I have an influence in my day that I can't explain. I'll give you a perfect example because I got this one on the way here. Our good friend Shane Dog out there. How you doing, Shane? He's getting ready to go to Colorado with our friends, and they climb high on the mountain where the oxygen is sparse. It's already bad enough in Colorado, but then they go higher up. And every year he has gotten deathly sick, where he's had to take a day or two to sit in the tent and recover. He's on a job today, and he starts talking to this doctor. He didn't know the guy was a doctor, just about stuff. And the guy's like, "Oh, you're going on this trip? That sounds great, man. What do y'all do? Drink?" You gonna be drinking too? And then Shane says, "No, man, I'm 10 years sober," or whatever it was, and I don't do that. And the guy said, "It's great. My brother's 22 years sober, blah, blah, blah. Hey, I can give you this medicine where you won't get sick." And the guy wrote him a script on the spot. He wrote him a script not only not to get sick, he wrote him a script if he gets a headache. It's like a steroid to help with these high altitude headaches. Because he's done it before. This guy climbs mountains in Colorado all the time. Now, what are the chances those two things are going to sync up and answer this problem that Shane thought was, he actually told me on the phone call prior to getting here, he was considering having to give up going, that this was going to be his last year if he got the headaches again. And higher power solved it. And I know for a fact Shane is a guy that walks every day hand in hand with his higher power, trying to do good in this world and trying to look for opportunities for higher power to show up. It's about being awake. I'm asleep when I'm staring at this. I'm asleep when I'm like fixing myself with all kinds of drugs and food and everything else. I am putting myself to sleep. But when I am in the pocket and I'm aware in the moment and I plug in that source, I get power to do things that are beyond human power. I get things that are beyond my power to do. Finish this freaking book, do this freaking podcast, help support Dan, see my friend Dan get sober. There is a power that shows up that accomplishes miracles. And I know that's a tired term, but I really don't know what else to call it. So I don't sit around and worry about, well, how does the electricity get to my house? And what's the exact current for this circuit that it comes through? It doesn't shock me, but it plugs in my hairdryer. All I care about is my hairdryer works, man. You understand? That is all I care about. So when people come at me, well, do you go to church? Do you believe in Jesus? Do you believe in God? I'm like, I don't even care. I really don't care. I'm a pragmatist. I have always been a pragmatist. I get it from my grandmother. She was always sensible. If it doesn't work, I don't give a fuck. Don't be coming at me with what doesn't work. And that's where the program actually got me, because it made logical sense. There's a lot of people that come in and say, "Oh, what's all this spirituality? This is just belief." No, it's sensible. It's scientific. I can break it down for you. And this power, you won't know it until you use it. I could say all the words in the world. Somebody can hit you with a Bible. You will not believe any of it until you experience it yourself. And I know Dan will back me up on this when he speaks. Literally, when you see your new guy go through it, and it gets you excited because you're reading Vickers say, "Oh, the power showed up. That son of a bitch just got a blessing off the graph. He got out of prison." And you're like, and then he's like, "Well, maybe there's something to this." I said, "You don't know nothing yet, kid. You don't know nothing yet. Go on the journey." That's my biggest message and takeaway for you all today. Go on the journey. When I was doing drugs and somebody handed me some acid with a great big bag of dope and said, "Go on the journey," I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm ready. Let's go. I want to go down the rabbit hole and I want to have an Alice in Wonderland experience." That is the path of spirituality. Because of our teachings and our programming, I believed when I came in and they told me I had to be spiritual, well, now I got to be a saint. I'm never going to have any more fun. I can never sin again. And this is going to be a boring life. I got to be perfect. No. The path of spirituality is, let's go on the journey. Drop the acid. See what happens. The acid in this case being the steps. That's the transitional element. If you do the steps, you will have the change. And you will have adventures you can't believe. I'm sitting there with the Dalai Lama, this close to the guy, being taught. And I'm sitting there going, how in the hell does a drug addict get here? I've heard people be at the White House and have that same reaction. How does a drug addict get allowed in the White House? And we're everywhere, folks. People in recovery, you can't see that we're broken. You can't see that we were hurt at one time. You see our success because we plugged into the power. And if you want your life to change, you can't do it alone. That's the bottom line of all recovery. If you're at home saying, well, I just got to figure this out. I have the power. I have willpower. As one of my patients told me today, if I have enough willpower, I won't drink again. That's not the spiritual journey. The spiritual journey is, I know nothing. I am open. I am willing. And I am ready to learn. And to me, that's always been the best definition of humility. Not humiliation, nothing negative, but being teachable. Can I sit with Dan, who is my sponsee, and learn something new? And I do it all the time. Can I allow him to tend to my wounds when I need to vent? And I let that ego out of the way and I let him do that. And I'm telling you, miracles happen at that moment. But you will never experience that if you've already made up your mind and your ego is in the way. Ego being the biggest block of all. So I know I was all over the map on a bunch of different things. I wanted to give you all a lot of different ways of looking at this. Okay. This will be a story that we will continue in almost every podcast because that's ultimately what this whole deal called life is about. This is actually your personal journey to grow. Now, one last thing I'll leave you with that my teacher taught me that made the most sense to me beyond anything else people try to describe what life means. She said we're all in school. And some of us are in 4th grade and doing really stupid shit. And some of us are in 8th grade. And we've learned a little bit since then. And we're not doing that same shit. But if you're higher on the ladder, don't piss on the 4th grader. You wouldn't beat up a 4th grader because he doesn't know how to do trigonometry yet. He's doing basic math. But don't we do that all the time when we're judging the acts of our fellows doing stupid stuff? Makes no sense. But it does make sense when it's like, oh, they don't know yet. They haven't been through that. Their soul has not developed through that, and that's what they're doing there. They're learning. Now, where she really hit me, though, is that this is scientific. All of life is constantly learning, growing, expanding, and transforming. Whether it's a plant that's trying to learn how to survive and not get eaten by a bug so it creates toxins. I just learned that caffeine in the coffee bean is a toxin so that the birds and the freaking insects don't eat it. That good stuff that's in this drink is a toxin to protect the fruit. And coffee is a fruit. I hope you know that. And then it also is in COVID. COVID as a virus is evolving and changing to learn how to be a better virus. So why would we be different? If every part of nature is constantly trying to transform and grow further down the path, why do we think we're any different? So instead of going through life thinking that nothing means nothing and whatever happened yesterday has no reference to my life's path, change your attitude towards that. Maybe everything means everything, and maybe what happened yesterday is very significant. I should probably talk to somebody about that. And then you're on the spiritual path. That's it. Being open. And having that sense of humility that I don't have all the answers. You could not talk to me in my treatment center, folks. I was so full of myself. And just saying I had an ego the size of Texas shows you how big my ego was, because, what makes you so special, dude? But I felt that way, and you couldn't tell me nothing. I could out-talk you, out-philosophize you, out-argue you, and now I like to be wrong. Now I like to learn new things. Now I love it when I'm stumped and I'm like, I was totally wrong about that situation. And that's the juice, as we call it. The juice is to grow and learn. And one last thing I'll say, and that's always the last thing, but I'm going to get Dan in here, is if you're in recovery and you have hit a dry spell, it means that you have stopped growing spiritually. Okay, and this is very common. It's going to happen to everybody in their path at certain times. Sometimes there are rest periods in the recovery journey. I call them like seasons, as I explained to Dan recently. Sometimes you're in spring, summer, and you're really moving forward, doing a lot of stuff. And then sometimes you lay back. It's autumn and it's winter, and I just need to reflect and percolate a little bit, not do so much. That's different. Sometimes, though, you hit a wall where you're just stuck in a rut, and you're getting bored, and you're hearing the same shit at meetings, but you're not doing anything new to change it. So at that moment, you've got to bring something new into your life. I encourage you to go to a new meeting. Maybe get a new sponsor to go through the work with. I promise you that's one of the best choices you ever make in your life. Do not go through the steps just once. Every teacher has something different to offer you. and read new books, go to workshops, get on YouTube and look up some new videos. Every day I'm playing a new video on something that I can learn from. I was learning about, so many things the past few days, but about brain foods, power foods to fight the amyloid plaques of Alzheimer's and dementia. And, just being interested. It keeps you young. And this is the best gift this thing gives us, is the ability to access that Library of Congress of information that's out there. But if that's what's keeping you stuck, is you have gotten into a routine where you're just doing the same, and the soul craves to grow. As I just told you, that's all of nature. It's always looking for something new. What's next? What's next? And this is why a lot of guys burn out in their early recovery. I feel like I've hit a wall. I was really feeling great, and then I got my 1 year, and it's just like, blah. It's like, yeah, well, how about you go to a new church? How about you try something different? Why don't you go on this retreat with us? Oh, no, man, I can't go on that retreat. That sounds gay. I'm just saying what they say to us. Stupid stuff. This is what we deal with. But again, it's saying no. And my final word is you got to say yes. That is what takes you on the spiritual journey. I hope that helped. And I hope to hear from you. Please drop us a line and let us know your questions. Let us know your journey and your experiences with this. Again, our email here is IM12, the word recovery, @gmail.com. IM12recovery @gmail.com. All right. Hope you enjoyed that. So now we're going to enter the discussion period, because we like to hear what our good friend Dan the Man can share from his own experience, because this is just one Yoko up here yapping his mouth. And when there's two yapping her mouth, maybe you'll believe there's something to it. So I know it's a deep and broad and huge, and I was over the map topic, but what do you think? What would you hit on if you were to talk about spirituality? Which, what angle do you want to take on it, right?
Yeah, and as we said in between the little segments here, it is an infinite thing that you can't possibly wrap. Just like you said, we cannot comprehend it. It's impossible for us to comprehend this thing. We have our own experience, and when you go on this trip, everybody's a cynic at first, right? It is. You just won't believe it. But as you said, I promise you that if you will go on this trip, if you will go on this journey, what will happen is the evidence will pile up, and you won't be able to deny it anymore. It gets the things that happen, and I don't know what that will be for you. But if you got a good guide that will help you see, that's another power of sponsorship, and it was something that I needed early on in my sponsor. So would interpret this stuff for me where I couldn't, my perspective, that I just listened to another book at Andy Andrews' book again the other day that's called The Noticer. And what he does, the guy and the character in the book, he comes around and offers you a different perspective about things. And that's what a sponsor can do for you. And I went that day in Gettysburg, God was showing up all day long. And that's what made it so good. And, but it's actually kind of private in a sense, I can't explain what happened to you if I tell you what went on that day. For the most part, it just looks like a regular old day. Mm-hmm. But I saw other things, and I kind of funny, there was the guide that was the YouTuber who I would love to go on a walk with him. He does these battlefield walks, but the Park Service, as good as their internet or their website and all that is, they don't do a very good job of telling you who is going to be the park guides on these trips. And I get there and I look at it Thursday night when I get there, and doggone it, don't say Matt Atkinson at 10 o'clock in the morning. And I didn't know, I just wished for it.
And to you, he's a rock star.
Yeah, I just love the dude's personality.
Huge
I love
moment.
the way, what they do, and that's kind of a parallel here. What that guy does is he takes you out to that battlefield, and he helps you interpret the battlefield. He tells you the lay of the land and where people were at, and you visualize it. And he even had a photograph from that era, which was right at the time that photography was beginning to happen. It took a few days for the camera crews to get from New York down to Gettysburg, and he had a photograph that he kneeled down and held, and it's kind of gruesome because it is dead. It's the reality of war, is these dead soldiers laying in this field, and the topography in the on his picture matched the topography what we were looking at, our line of sight, and he took us out in the field. Come with me for a minute. We'll walk down here. Try not to step on too many of these farmers' crops. Let's try to be careful with the farmers. And And that was helping like interpret it and giving us some perspective about what was going on there.
Without a guide, you would have missed that.
That's what I'm saying.
Which is our tradition of having a sponsor. But for those of you out there, you can always just be aware to have someone that comes across your path who maybe seems more developed than you, or my friend Mike who had the smile on his face. Go ask him. Ask him, what have you got? What is that? What is that all about?
If you're seeing that in there, that is another one of that part of this gut thing, which I believe is what is like the connection to my higher power at some level that I certainly don't understand. And more than likely, you're right, that if you see that in that gal or guy, and the good thing about it is, if you go ask him that and he's going to want to help you.
No doubt.
No doubt. And then
when that light flares like that and says, I want that, that's the heart of the term namaste. Namaste means the light in me recognizes the light in you, that we aren't just human beings, that we are souls, we are spirits, we are larger than that.
And once again, Spons, you are exactly right. This spirituality angle and this higher power thing is the
There you go. We got a high five over that one, man. We have been going back and forth on that for years.
Without that, everything else is hinged. All the other things we talk about are hinged off of that, really.
Yeah, I agree.
And so, yeah, that is the very best thing.
And it was free. I didn't ask for it. I didn't deserve it.
I didn't even want
it. It was just offered to me like, hey, man, check this out. And I resisted it. You're right. I was like, no, I want you. I don't need that. Yeah, can't believe
I'll do the rest of this stuff, but I'm not going to, this God thing in here, how can I navigate this and get sober and not deal with the God thing? And a lot of guys come in wanting to do that. They want all of it, but when that is really the
best
top
part
of the pyramid.
It's the best part. And then Dan and I were talking on break. It's like the difference between 3:00 on a Tuesday afternoon, something happens that just means nothing. You're just like, just another day. And you come home and they say, how was your day? Blah. Versus when you're plugged in and you're awake and you're walking the spiritual path, that little something meant something, and you see the deeper meaning and you get the juice from it. And they say, how was your day? Well, I had something really happen at 3:00. Interesting to have it. It makes your life more satisfying, more fulfilling on a daily basis. Rarely does a day go by where something I can't point to or I didn't see higher power show up in some way.
Yeah.
Small or large.
Small or large, yeah. I just gave Christopher an example. I've been looking for this little fob thing that will turn on my camera. And I was looking for it, and while Christopher was doing the education portion today, I thought, man, I ought to get up and go find that thing. I should go, but I didn't want to interrupt the flow of what was going on here. And I sit here and listen, and I realized the thing is hanging on my tripod that camera is attached to, and it was a bingo. I was just, all right, cool. I'm almost manifest. I mean, it's been hanging there for weeks. How come I didn't see it before? But it just popped on there. I don't even know that it was there before, but it was there just now. And instead of reaching up there and punching that button on that camera, I get to hit a button right here.
I think that brings it more down to earth, though, for people that are just starting out, that whether he manifested it or not, or was his attention distracted. And when he plugged in and he's centered and he's calm, breathing, you see things that you just wouldn't have noticed, or it's right there in front of you, whatever. That's one of the best pieces of advice everybody ever gave me when you're in recovery and you're looking for something and you can't find it, and just stop and breathe. Just let go. Stop looking for it. Start breathing, and then you'll look and it's right there.
Yep. Yep. That's It's almost like it's also can be kind of like the power of prayer thing, where I ask my higher power for help with something. And, and my other term I like to say, with this deal, the skids are greased all the time. Things tend to go my way. The cards tend to fall my way when I'm working this, when I'm operating with these guidelines.
And what you care about is that result. Like, I just want to see what it does. I'm not, whether I'm going to call it a rose band, their name, call it God or Beelzebub or whatever, Muhammad. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. It doesn't change the nature of the power.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've always said too, everybody has a different name for it, but of course, they would, because we have different languages all over the world, and why would you think they all have their own word for it? To use your example from earlier, they all have a word for water that is different. Does that make water not
in the least?
Does it somehow make it like it's not as real as it? No, it doesn't. We were talking about being children, and one of my favorite things is to watch the guys I sponsor not do that to their kids. and protect their kids' spirituality and allow them to, actually give them permission to find their own. And you see much happier little children running around. And I'm interested as time goes by what fruit that's going to bring, because that is a huge miracle for them to have parents that are not screwing up their connection with the universe.
Our good friend Darren, and I know he's given me permission to share any of his stories that will help somebody. He was taken to a Pentecostal church at a very young age. He was probably 4 or 5. And he goes, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just trying to pay attention. I don't really understand what's going on. And this woman jumps up out of her pew and starts just blabbering. And he thought she was being attacked by a snake. Like, literally, he was like, something's wrong. He was alarmed. He was afraid. And he didn't understand she's speaking in tongues or what any of that meant. No. So his first introduction to a God was fear. And see, we don't make those connections because you guys are looking at it through an adult brain today. And an adult brain can understand, well, no, that's what they believe and that's what they do. But for a child, they just know monsters in the closet. And so some monster had gotten a hold of this woman, and now forever he would associate God with a bad thing, even if it's on a subconscious level. This is what I'm teaching you all today, is that I don't care if you disagreed with everything someone taught you. It's in your computer banks if you have not done an inventory. If you've not talked to a sponsor about it, you are still choking on that virus until you get in there and scan it out. Same way as if I had one in my system, I would unplug that computer and take it apart and get that thing out of there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you got to run some malware on it and get that stuff out of there.
Malware is a great term for all the stuff we were taught.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
I was, you just talking, the first time I did the first AA meeting I was ever at and had no idea what I was doing, just fumbling in there, and trying not to look too much like an idiot. And I cried at the Lord's Prayer at the end. I felt that energy. There was something that touched me there. And I know it didn't have, I don't know that it had anything to do with the words in that prayer or any of that, but we held hands, and that connection was made in that room, and I could not help but have tears start coming out of my eyes. I'm all embarrassed about it, and I still do sometimes today. And I feel that today, when we circle up, put our arms around each other, and I feel that power surge of all of our actual physical connections with these dudes who are on a bunch of dudes who are on a spiritual high kind of thing. They're doing the deal. You feel that electricity in there, and I don't close my eyes, man. I had somebody else. I look around at these dudes that are here with me, man, and I almost spend a second on every face that's in it, whether the face is down with their eyes closed praying, or sometimes I lock eyes with a guy because he's doing what I'm doing. I heard some speaker mention that, and I started trying it. And I do. I'm looking and appreciating and giving some thanks that these guys are here with me. Stalactites come from the top. They hang tight. I don't know why I can remember that. We've done a lot of, Southern Indiana's full of caves, and we've done I remember being on all these caves when I was a little kid, and I've never forgotten that the stalactites come from the top. I did remember
there's a difference between the two, so Jefferson County Public School wins again. That's a joke if you live around here.
And there is no way to explain this. You have to go on a trip, and you do have over and
You
over
won't
again.
believe it. You will not believe it until you see it for yourself, and this is especially true for addicts and alcoholics. We are show me. Just like say fucking Missouri. We have the show me state. Yeah. I've got to see it for myself.
The concept I talk, it's all over the big book about us having to put down our old ideas. New conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. Their old ideas are cast aside over and over again. It talks about having to put down your old ideas and just, like I said, get dumb and just do what your sponsor tells you and promise you that you'll have. And I enjoy that part of sponsorship too. Those first few days that I'm meeting with a guy, and he's over there pontificating with me about how come there ain't one, and he just don't buy this shit, and and he'll give me his reasons why. And everybody has their little deck of playing cards of resistance. This happened to me when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. how about those TV preachers that got in trouble? They all got their cards they play that put up their wall around them. And then later on down the pile, where we get them out into, usually out past 5 is usually when it happens, 5, 6, 7. They have changed and they're open. And, you get to hear I didn't believe you at first, but you were right. Like, yep, I know, man. I didn't believe it one time either.
Revolutionary. I mean, one of our friends gave the lead for the Sunday morning on your retreat. And this was a person who was anti-spiritual anything, just like I was. And again, it's not, I want to shout this from the mountaintops. It is not restricting. It is not what you're thinking, like, it's not going to be fun. I'm never going to have sex again. I'm never going to fuck up again. No, you are going to fuck up. That is the journey of spirituality. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to be human. And you'll be okay being human and flawed versus trying to pretend on Sunday that you don't have any problems.
Yeah.
God, that little front I had to keep up with my family. That, somehow we're, despite all the alcoholic wreckage going on behind closed doors, we're just fine over here. Everything's great. All American family.
Yeah. It was relieving to stop trying to figure it out.
Yes.
When I stopped trying to figure it out and just like you said, just go for the ride, keep my eyes open and those questions, like you're kind of like, I think it's kind of like it's similar to what you were getting at when people ask you, do you believe in Jesus? Do you go to church and do that kind of stuff? Well, the thing when a guy goes, well, how come this is going on? If there's a God,
that's a big one.
How come this and how come that? And it's like, hold on, God is not doing those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily believe he comes down here and prevents you from doing it.
Can't.
He won't. He doesn't. Whatever this power is doesn't operate that way. And it ain't really, I don't believe it's a he. I will use them terms because that's my old stuff, and the word God is still being used. But in my mind, I'm not picturing a male. And in my mind, I'm not thinking of God. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of something more like this, like you said, electricity, the universe's electrical current or something, that just operates in a certain way. There are principles, and I think some of those spiritual principles are no different than some of the physical laws like gravity and these things they just are.
So the way it was explained to me, and I really feel obligated to share this piece because I know how much it helped me and I know it'll help others. The entire universe operates on laws, okay? You have laws of biology, you have laws of weather, you have laws of physics. And, my old spiritual teacher used to say, well, let's say you decide to jump off a building, but God loves you so much and doesn't want you to die that all of a sudden he just picks you back up and you go right back on the building. She said every single person who would witness that would lose their ever freaking loving minds. The entire world would be in chaos because the laws don't make any sense. There would be no sense to anything. Like, well, how come he got spared and this person gets spared? How come he gets to float up and I don't get to float up? And so when you have a low pressure system hitting a high pressure system, you're going to have a thunderstorm. And that thunderstorm might generate tornadoes. And that is not God sending a tornado to your house. That is just the laws, the way they're set up. Now, if he goes monkeying with them, you're going to screw with people's minds. There'll be no up, there'll be no down, there'll be no left, no right. None of it will make any sense. Now, one of the most major laws we have is free will. You have the right to do whatever you want with your life. They say it's your greatest gift. And we will complain about it because I want to have my free will, but I don't want you to have your free will and do fucked up things. And so my sponsor asked me one time, he said, how many people do you think are on the planet? And I had to look it back up when I was writing the book, working on that part of the book recently. It was like 6 billion, or it might have been 5 billion. No, it was 4 or 5 billion back in 1984. That's how much we've grown. It's 9 now. It's 9. It's getting printed on 9 now. And so all these people are running around doing whatever the hell they want. Do you think some of them are going to screw it up and do some things that are wrong? I was like, well, of course. And I said, do you think those are going to hurt people? Well, of course. Well, why are we blaming God for that? This is your gift. It's like to have him take that away from you just so we have a perfect world would mean you wouldn't be able to live your life on your terms. And then he went further and said, if you were about to get your smoke or your drug in your body and, you needed it worse than anything that day and you killed to get it and you finally got it, you got this close to your lips and God shows up and says, I'm not going to let you do it because I love you so much. You would hate that. You would kill that God. I know, and any addict would. You are not going to interfere with me getting what I need to get. That's the problem with saying that God's responsible or that everything has a reason or that this, and again, it's okay if you disagree. You can disagree in spirituality, but that term I think is so uncompassionate when somebody loses a partner in a terrible accident, or the people in 9/11, and you're going to come out of nowhere having never been through anything like that, never walked an inch in their shoes, let alone a mile, and you're going to say, everything has a reason, God has a plan. I think it's extremely insensitive, and I disagree wholeheartedly. Sometimes there are accidents. That's what the world, now we don't like to think about that because we want to have that idea of order, and chaos frightens us. But yeah, sometimes if you get a guy that tries to turn left while the other car's coming through the stoplight, there's going to be an accident, and it's a tragedy. And better to give them support and love on them and show them that you're there for them more than to tell them everything has a damn reason. I'm not big on that kind of talk because I don't think God's pulling the strings like the Wizard of Oz, master puppeteer behind the curtain, trying to say, well, you go over here and you go over there. Now, one last thing I got to say about that, because I just got through talking about this power. When you are plugged in, and just like the animals with that tsunami, their natural instincts were plugged in, and they thought, we need to go to higher ground, and they just turned and did it without analyzing it. They didn't have a meeting. They didn't have a debate. They just went and did it, and they all survived. When you are plugged in, you can actually use that power to be more attuned to your environment and avoid disasters. So maybe the little voice in your gut goes, you shouldn't turn left yet. And then you look and the car goes, whoo! How many times have you had that experience where you just something told you, wait a second? That's what we're talking about being plugged into this power. So it's not that the power is manipulating us, but we have that ability to plug in and get that higher awareness. And I'm totally okay if a neuroscientist wants to call it your higher mind. They tell us we only use about 2% of our human brain, maybe 4%, I forget how much it is, but it's a very small region. So if I'm able to just reach that higher mind and use that, I don't care what I call it. I just know that it's prevented disaster in my life many times where I could have done a choice or gone one way, but I stopped and reflected, and suddenly I made the right choice, and my life went the skids were greased, right?
Yep. It does happen, and that's again, that. So it kind of sounds a little bit like maybe there's some conflict in like the everything happens for a reason, it's God's plan thing, what I think I hear you saying, like when under those circumstances, I agree that is impatient. That is not helpful to tell people that. But and I don't think there's like you said that there's some kind of strings being pulled back there either. But like on the other side of things, I do see like some things that happen for a reason, and you don't know why yet. Mm-hmm. Something will happen to you today, or something will go on today, and you could just let that go and move forward, and in a couple of days you'll realize, that's I see so many things in the rearview mirror. That's the way I see my life more. I can't see into the future, but I can see in the rearview mirror, and that's another one of those things that can end up on my miracle list. That something happened a little while back. I didn't see it for what it was, and then later on I figure out why that particular thing happened. Those little, people call them God shots, God winks, all those kind of little things like that are. They're just fun, and there's a limit to that too, Some people, what Bill in the Big Book talks about, spiritual make-believe and getting this spiritual intoxication. Usually most new people in recovery will go through a period of spiritual intoxication where everything is something, and I don't like to be out on that limb either. Kind of takes the specialness out of the things that are happening, If every single thing was special, the special things aren't special anymore.
But what you guys just witnessed there is why spirituality can save our world where religion has failed us, frankly. Dan and I just had a little discussion about he sees it one way and I see it another way. You can go to a meeting with 30 people, and each person in that group all over the world, which is millions now, has their own conception of a higher power. Yet we are not at each other's throat. Yeah. We're not taking up guns to shoot each other. We are just talking about it, and we're learning from each other and say, that's an interesting way to look at it. Let me tell you about this. How about this? And you made me think about what made total sense to me is when you had that reading with that one fellow, and I'm telling you, he nailed it. It made a lot of sense to me that we do have an internal blueprint, that there are certain things in our lifespan that we're supposed to go through for our spiritual development. It's not a bad thing. It's to help us grow. So maybe my alcoholism was in my blueprint, that no matter I tried to run, I tried to hide, it was there. Every time I took a turn to avoid it, it was like it was there. You're back at dreaming. And I'm like, I guess this is what I'm supposed to do. And look what came out of that. all good, right? So I can see that. But you got free will on top of that. So he made the point that you can actually disagree and go against your blueprint. You won't be punished, but it will still put more pressure because you're supposed to be doing this. Yeah. And so there'll be a little bit of a rub there. But it's not your entire life. Your entire life is decided by you about where you're going, this or that, or even whether you want a blueprint. According to him and other teachers I've had, it'll be in your next life. It'll show up again because you didn't go through that part of my old teacher used to call it shining up your diamond. And a diamond has all these different facets. Each angle is a different facet. I'm going to shine that part up. I'm going to shine that part up. So this life, I'm shining up my alcoholism, and I'm going to get that part fixed. Okay, good. I never have to do that again. Now I got to work on this part of my soul. And that gives me hope, because it gives me hope that there's not only purpose, maybe not reason, but purpose, and that also that there's more to this life, that I'm not just working on this for no reason. I would hate to think that I went through all this suffering and work to get sober, and then I die and I find out it didn't mean anything. Yeah. I don't think that's going to be the case whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't either. One of the, I came into the 12-step world, and you guys encouraged me to develop a relationship, develop a higher power, develop this connection. And then best of all, I don't be rejected for what I chose. Like you said, we can all get along, and we all do really truly do fall at that. One of the bigger pieces of 12-step recovery is that you get to have your own, and people allow you that. Actually, they're sometimes interested in it.
Yeah. If a guy's going to a Hindu temple, I might ask him to take me one time. Yeah. Which we have in town here. And also church is a big part of a lot of people's spirituality. Yep. They use it more as a tool than the only way. Right. It's one of the ways they practice their spiritual, rather than that's the only thing I do. I remember one of our friends said, I never forgot this. They said that whenever somebody says they're spiritual, the first question they want to ask them is, what do you do? And that struck me as like, yeah, we all say we're spiritual, but if you ain't walking, you ain't putting any action, you're not really spiritual, right? So I heard Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, get that said one time, and it was really profound. The interviewer says, so do you consider yourself spiritual? And Jerry goes, yeah, I think I am. He didn't even pause. And the guy goes, really? What does that mean? He goes, I'm kind. I'm kind to everybody I run into today. And I was like, that's it. He's got it. No wonder he's so freaking successful. He's nice to the guy making his sandwich, or he's nice to the producer on the Hollywood backlot. Doesn't matter. He's kind. He's nice. That to me is the pinnacle of spirituality. Can I get through my day without hurting somebody else? Because I'm pissed or whatever's going on.
Yep. And, and allowing everybody to be at the grade level they're at.
Yes. Let them have their journey. How many of us try to get people sober before their time? Hell, that's half my job. And they're just not ready. They're just not ready. But it's a lot more peaceful. You're right. It's a lot more peaceful not to fight and let them have their own experiences and learn on their own.
Yeah, it's the going with the flow kind of thing instead of trying to swim upstream. And I had a text from somebody overnight last night that wanted to know my opinion about something, and I didn't know who it was. And they were up somebody's. I figured it out, but they were questioning somebody else's sobriety. And what do you think about a guy who does this? Would you call him sober? And she could tell that the tone.
Tell him to send it to the podcast.
You could tell the tone, and I was, that's the easy answer. Hey, I don't know. They're on their journey. I focus on my journey. Mm-hmm. I find it much more beneficial to stay focused on my journey. And makes that answer to her very easy.
That's awesome.
Instead of getting into a pissing contest about what is sober and what ain't.
So all we're saying today is to use this as sort of a wake-up call. In the book, I call it a call to arms. This is your chance to go back and reclaim your original soul, what you believed as a child, and then build on that. You got to challenge your programming. You got to get in there and disinfect yourself. And then after you do that work, and again, all that's in the book. When it comes out, you'll see all the easy way tools to do that in step 3. This is not in the big book. This is stuff we learned since then. And you can start fresh. It's like a reboot. Say, okay, I've been able to dump my old programming. What's next? What do I like? and you will be amazed before you're halfway through, as we say in the program.
Yeah. This software is much better software.
Oh my God. It's the best life ever. Let's just say what it is. It's the best life ever. So, all righty, everybody. Thank you for being with us for the discussion period. All righty, now we're going to go into the question and answer period where we ask you, the listener, to send in your life questions about anything having to do with your personal journey, anything you're struggling with, anything you just wonder, what the hell do I do here? If you'll send them, you'll get some free advice. I do have the therapy experience and a lot of professional training, which I will bring to bear, but I am representing here just as a guy in recovery on the path and have 40 years of freaking experience. So I do. And if I don't know, I will refer it out and we'll see what Dan has to say and we'll get other people involved if we can get you an answer if I'm stumped. So please check it out. Iam12recovery@gmail.com. All right. So first question, I have 3 of them here for you today. I have a friend who is not working a actual program, but has acknowledged their problem. They've actually gone to rehab, and they now employ medical interventions. In parentheses, drinking makes them violently ill. Question is, are they sober? So there's a lot of debate, especially now in recovery, about what sobriety is. It's never been an issue when I was growing up in recovery. It's suddenly become an issue, I believe, mostly through the influence of marijuana. And then we had Suboxone, and then we had other things come down the pike. And there is a huge difference between using an early recovery tool to stabilize your brain to allow you to have a chance to get sober versus being on something year after year after year after year. So I just want to establish that. All of the medical interventions. Now, this one that makes them violently ill, that's called anabuse. It's not really used much anymore. It just makes people sick. There was an old joke about that where a guy from an AA group went to go do treatment and they gave him anabuse. And he says, oh, it was crazy. They give me this medicine and then they put you in this room with this big barber chair and you're staring at this big mirror with all these liquor bottles on it. And you get to drink whatever you want. They say, go ahead, have it whatever you want. But every time you take a drink, you're just getting sick. You're getting sick and you have to stare at yourself in the mirror while you're getting sick. And it's called adverse conditioning. It's the same thing you do when you beat your dog with a newspaper when they poop in the house. And it's supposed to train animals to not do that, right? Well, you can't train an alcoholic. So he goes back to his meeting. His friend says, well, how'd it work? How you doing? He goes, oh, I've never taken anabuse again in my life. So leave it up to an actor and alcoholic. They'll find a way. So these are tools that we have now. One is called Vivitrol, naltrexone, that is great for alcoholics if you're currently doing treatment in addition to taking the medication. If you just take the medication, it will not have much effect, according to the research. But if you're in treatment, it will allow your brain to stabilize with cravings so that you're not having to battle them all day and you can actually concentrate on your recovery. Same thing with people recovering from opioids using Suboxone with my old sponsor, Dr. Burns Brady, knew more about this stuff than anybody I've ever met. He used to jokingly call it methadone light. So there is that aspect to it. It's not as bad as methadone, but it's still, and any drug that people also trade on the street and use to get high, you got to wonder, is this really good? But I have also been open-minded and seen enough success that if somebody uses that in the short term to get over the early recovery blues and pain where their brain's just completely offline with all their pain-relieving chemicals, which we're going to talk about in the next episode on post-acute withdrawals, and it just gives them a chance. Otherwise, the cravings are too strong and they just end up folding. So I support that 100%. Now, being sober, technically, yes. That is being dry off the chemical. We tend to have this stratified way of looking at recovery. First, you get the guys that are just dry. They are just not using their chemical and they're not really doing much else for their growth and for their development. And then you have these people that are sober. They go to some meetings, they engage in some of the tools, but they haven't really gotten a sponsor, a real sponsor, not a friend, a real sponsor that's going to make you do the 12 steps. And they haven't done the full work. They have maybe done some of the work. Maybe they did it on their own. Those guys crack me up. Doing inventory on your own, not a good idea. And they usually get relapse because of it. But, yeah, those guys are sober. So technically, if you want to call him sober, great, he's sober. What he is not is on the path of recovery. The path of recovery is this entire approach that I'm going to heal physically, mentally, and spiritually, and I'm going to go back dig in to do inventory, to clear out this stuff that I was programmed with that is killing me. All these liabilities that Bill says are keeping me from my potential. These are the things that defeat me. And then in step 9, I'm going to clean up my past so I'm not facing anybody and knowing that I owe them something and I've not addressed it. This past week in our home group, we had somebody bring their brother in, and their brother made an interesting comment when he introduced himself, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. He goes, well, I quit a long time ago. I don't really suffer from what you gentlemen are here for tonight. So I felt judgment when he said that at first, and I also heard I'm different. But what he was saying was he was assuming that we're all sitting there craving alcohol and we're just barely white knuckling our way through it, right? Which is the complete opposite in my home group. So I leaned over to Shane next to me and I said, I'm not thinking about drinking right now. Are you thinking about? No, I'm not thinking about. What's he talking about? So, but he strikes me as a guy who maybe saw Jesus, got back through his church, and we do not have a monopoly on God. That's what Bill says. There's many roads to spirituality. So if that worked for him, God bless him. But you know what he didn't do? He didn't do the steps. And if he hasn't done the steps, then he hasn't cleaned up his past. And I personally think that is the height of selfishness and self-centeredness, which Bill says is at the root of our spiritual ills. Underneath all of our other isms with our alcohol and drug use is this self-focus. It's all about me, and I don't give a damn if I hurt you because I've got to get what I got to get. That's my self-centeredness. And he has not made amends, but he's sitting there saying, but I'm sober now. Look at me. I'm happy now. Look at me. My life is good now. Look at me. Meanwhile, he probably has kids that he's not even spoken to. I run into this in my group a lot where my patients will say, well, my mom's sober. Yeah. Did she ever make amends to you? No. How do you feel about that? I hate her. Don't even talk to her? No, I'm not talking to that bitch. But now her mom is over here beating her drum because she's no longer using. So that's not recovery. So I want to be real clear about that. And there's many pathways like we just talked about in the spirituality. You can choose your own experience and your own progress, your own process. But don't call yourself recovered around me. I'll straighten you out real fast. What are you doing for other people? What are you doing to spread the word and help others with what you've been given? Or did you just take? That just blows me away. The guys that come in, they'll take from their sponsor, they get free rides to the meeting, they'll do all, and then they don't give back when they're asked to help out. That's not recovery. So I don't know if that's what they want and they're happy. Let them be. It's not your program. It's not your journey. Or as I say at the treatment center on a daily basis, not my circus, not my monkeys. Don't let it affect your recovery journey. You go for the gold and you go for the best you can get for yourself. If somebody accepts half measures, which avail us nothing, as the big book says, but if that's what they want for their life, that's their journey. But if I meet a guy who's been on Suboxone for 3 years, I'm like, dude, you're not doing it right. You're still leaning on that as your source of strength, as your source of higher power, or just power, if you want to call it that. You haven't found another higher power to replace that, which is what the goal of recovery is I'm going to develop that new source of power that's going to enable me to get out of bed and face this world and not run and hide from it and get high. So that's what I would say. Any thoughts on that, Dan, about whether somebody using medical management interventions is sober?
I haven't heard people talk about abuse really.
It's old school.
Yeah, I don't run into that too much. When I first hit recovery some 12, 13 years ago, I knew some guys that were on that. I had a cousin that got put on it for some reason for a while. Well, I know why, but I meant I don't know. It was a pill he was supposed to get up and take. And he just simply didn't take it. It's like, exactly. You send him home and say, take one of these every day. And, and if you drink that, then you're going to get sick. And it's Friday morning and you're like, man, the guys are going out tonight. Well, I'm not going to take the damn pill today. I'm not planning to drink tonight, but I'm not going to take the thing. And I wonder if that's what I would like to ask the person what they actually mean by that. They say drinking makes them violently ill. And I guess maybe I'm not seeing the word, so I don't see how it's written exactly, but
it says they employ medical interventions. Drinking makes them ill, so that means whatever they're taking, whatever they're taking is causing that reaction.
But you know, I can't really go much further. Are you in recovery or are you sober? And people who are sober, you know, if you don't wipe all that malware out, like we talked earlier, which is ultimately underneath of why I had to use in the first place. And we know that people who are just dry, you know, the kind of thing is, you know, the guy who's just dry, you know, well, eventually the wife says, Dan, just take a damn drink. I'd rather have you drunk than being the asshole you are. And you know, you get to choose, but as talked about a little bit, you know, I can get in a lot of trouble, and I will tend to go down that path when I start judging other people's recovery, and I certainly do at times, because I don't think if you're not doing your drug of choice, you know, I know a number of people who, you know, at least they're not doing heroin anymore.
Yeah.
But they're still drinking.
Which I get for harm reduction. We as therapists are taught about harm reduction. Right. At least they're not robbing your house to get their marijuana. So, okay, good on that.
Yeah, good.
But what if there's more? That's the thing that kills me the most. There are so many clinicians and psychiatrists that I run into who will just give that as the only option. They don't even offer this recovery option because they don't know what it is.
Yeah, right.
They've never even been to a damn meeting. That's within my own hospital. I would be surprised if any of the doctors in my hospital have been to an actual AA meeting.
Yeah.
Unless it was forced on them during their training. They had to go one time.
Yeah.
And they've not seen recovery as or even offered as an option. So you're not allowing that person their own choice. You're just saying, well, here, you're going to have to take this pill the rest of your life. Yeah. That's not a solution.
I guess, you know, and we'll have to watch out. But, you know, I know some people who are taking drugs and, you know, because of chronic pain or because of this or that, you know, and we're not prohibited from pain relief. It's not the point, but like you said, the long-term thing, that's supposed to be short-term. But if you got chronic and you're taking it, but like I can see in some guys that, you know, that they're overusing it, and it shows in their personality and it shows in their demeanors and that kind of thing, or else they're getting some awful high doses. And, you know, I had to make that not my business, really. That's none of my goddamn business. That's between him.
See, and that's a different approach. My good friend LJ, one of his dearest loved ones, had surgery yesterday. And he was just reporting in because he has to dispense the meds, and it's not bothering him at all. He's not even thinking about it. And this is a guy who would have stolen every pill you had.
Right.
And he said, you know, she just wanted half. I was like, that's great.
Yep.
That's a sober person. That's somebody who's in recovery. He's like, let me try half first before I take a whole one. And you can see it when somebody is overusing, and their personality is off. They're in a haze. They're slow. And they're repeating themselves, and it's sad to watch. That's the progression of the disease, where the old Chinese saying, first the man takes the drink, then the drink takes a drink, and then the drink takes the man. You can see it happening right before your eyes, but that is the result of not letting a sponsor be in close contact and allowing them that you have to be accountable to that person and let them help you stay out of trouble. Do not resist taking pain meds. I see so many idiots come in and say, well, I'm just not taking them again because that was my drug of choice. And I'm like, well, good luck having heart surgery, which my mom had, where they're going to crack open your chest and you're not going to take a pain pill. You're going to be screaming for them to give you that pump while you're in there, pal. But it's just about being monitored. And I can't say enough about the pamphlet and AA medication and the AA member. Look it up on the AA website, aa.org. Look up the pamphlets. Medication and the AA member. It will keep you out of trouble. I've navigated many a man through that process. But, yeah, no, if you're on your own free willing it, that's dangerous. And the other thing we need to talk about is this California sobriety shit that you still smoke pot. And I'm just like, this idea in our culture today, which shows how sick we are as a nation, that there's no consequences and there are no downsides to marijuana. When it's not the old marijuana, this is an advanced narcotic now. This is at a level from 2% to 30%. You take any drug, whether it's cocaine, and go from 2% to 30%, you're going to have a lot more damage to the human body. And I had a guy say it in group the other day, oh, the cops don't even care about that anymore. I said, yeah, I know. And CPS doesn't even care about it anymore. So now the kids aren't going to grow up with sober parents who ever got a chance to recover because they were made to go to meetings and they found out, oh, there's a different way. Oh, we're just going to allow them to smoke pot now, and we're going to ruin that kid's life because now they're hooked on pot. It appalls me, you know, but it just seems to be the freeing nature of our country that nobody cares anymore because there's so much worse we have to focus on the worst because that's not so bad. And it's like, no, it's not recovery, pal. Don't come in my group and say you're recovery and be smoking pot. We'll stretch you straight. And I give that young man a lot of credit who the other week stood up and told us, man, I don't have a sobriety date yet because I was still smoking. That takes balls. That takes a real man to face his truth. And that's what recovery is. We're going to stop lying about our truth.
Yeah. Yep.
We can imagine. I tell my patients all the time, would you believe a word out of my mouth if you knew I was going home getting high every night? And I have the gall to come in here and tell you, I'll stay sober. So.
Well, next question.
Yeah. They're dry, but I don't want what they have. That's the old standby we go to is, do you want what they have? All right. Second question out of 3 we have today. As a fellow alcoholic, I have an understanding of this very complicated disease, and yet it continues to baffle me. Yes, I was thinking about this just yesterday, what brilliance in those 3 words. Cunning, baffling, and powerful. He covered every angle. This thing is a grand chess master. It will outthink you, outwit you, and beat you, and you'll be played before you know it. It's also baffling. Don't try to make sense of it. Don't try to understand it. Don't think it's going to be logical. And it's powerful. It has more power than you do. So it continues to baffle me. I have this sponsee who's about halfway through their step work and they're several months sober. That's great. Terrific. However, they cannot seem to let go of an old relationship that they know was not healthy. And they continue to seek their self-worth in other people that they are attracted to. They also distract themselves with this kind of attention. Despite knowing all of this is not helping them, but hurting them, do you have any advice to help me mentor this person? Great question. This is a question that's more universal for everybody about navigating relationships. So the more I work in the therapy field, the more I've come to the belief that our choices for relationships are going to be hardwired into us by a very young age. The neuroscientists would say age 2. I'll say by age 10 for sure. And so whatever was normalized, whether we agreed with it or not, or wanted in our lives, that's what we will seek out in a partner because it's familiar. And the brain is always going towards homeostasis and what is familiar and not threatening, even if it's effed up to the top degree. So, we cannot expect our sponsees to come in and be perfect. The old standby, whenever I would bring a problem to my old sponsor, Burns Brady, and say, I can't believe they're doing this. And now I got theirs all screwed up. And he would just look at me and say, Christopher, with that shit-eating Southern accent, are they doing the work? I'd be like, yes. He says, they're going to be fine. You have to trust the process. Now, there is a point where this distraction gets in the way of them doing their work. Like, did you do your 4-step work last week? No, I went on a date because I've met this new dude. That's a different animal. That's where you need to clam down, put your foot down, sponsor, say, that is not acceptable. This is about you right now. You do not need this in your life. We recommend most people defer personal relationships for your first, well, I don't even put a time on it, just while we're doing the steps. This should be your journey to learn about you, and anybody you bring into your life is going to ruin that for you. It's going to ruin this opportunity for you to really grow and expand your horizons, and you won't even be attracted to them by the time we get done. You will want a better partner. I can promise you that. But you can't fix their programming overnight. I see people with multiple decades of recovery, and I've gone through this, where they repeat patterns, and you're like, wow, my God, I can't believe they're still doing that. But it's human nature. We're never shooting for perfection. Another point of brilliance that Bill Wilson put in the How It Works when he says we are not saints. The point is we are willing to grow. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. So try to tolerate them, talk to them. If they talk too much, discipline them, put limits on it. Say, all right, here's the deal. I will give you 5 minutes to bitch about this situation, and then we're moving on because we need to talk about the work. We're either talking about the problem or we're talking about the solution. I will give you a chance. Go ahead, go. Say everything you got to say, but 5 minutes, pal. That's all it is. That's my line. And then we're getting right into the solution. And if you steer it that way, you can hopefully navigate them out of that. There is an addiction factor for unhealthy relationships that's uncanny in its power. We know that scientifically an average partner of abuse will take 8 or 9 times leaving the person until it'll stick, meaning that they will actually pack up, leave, desert them, and still come back. And I've got a male that I'm working with recently who experienced some of that. And they're kind of stunned because, like, I can't believe it. I'm putting up with it. Say, it's not your fault. Again, what do we say in this podcast all the time? It's not your fault. It's your programming, and you're still early in recovery. You have not had a chance to change your brain, which is what this work does. So have compassion, talk to her straight about it, but keep emphasizing the main point. This is taking away from your journey. This is about you right now. Do not let this ruin, because if you do, your future's screwed. Your kids are going to be screwed up. You may end up in prison, and you will likely die from this disease. There's a lot at freaking stake here. So let's not worry about him and the past and all that. We'll get on your 4-step. But I'm going to give you 5 minutes, bud. Go ahead. I can talk for 5 minutes with somebody, but that's it. We're getting into the solution. We're moving forward. And I know Dan's like this. I have my sails up. I've got my rudder in the boat. We are going forward, man. And if you are not with me, I'm going to lose you and move on to the next person. And tell them that too. That gets them off them real fast. Say, I'm going to drop you if you keep on with this. We need to be getting on the work. And that's the line, though, I said, if it's interfering with the work. So any thoughts on that one, Dan? Of course, I covered a lot of bases there. Didn't leave you much meat on the bone.
Yeah, but, and maybe a little bit separate angle or a little different, but, if you're coming here to 12-step recovery and you've like signed up for this and you have like accepted this prescription as what you're going to bet your boats on, because that's kind of what we've done when we come in here. We come in here going, God, I hope this works. And then what you do when you get into a relationship in that period, you're like introducing this variable in that is very unpredictable. You're going to find you're trying to do this, rewrite your software and reprogram this mind, and you've brought something in that is going to pull you back to old patterns because you're going to start trying to be something that you think that person wants you to be. You can't help it when you're not. Like today, I don't think we can help it hardly at all. I think as a recovered man and been working this program for a while, I'm not near as susceptible to it. I'm pretty much the same guy all the time, and if you don't like me the way Dan is, then you don't like Dan, and we're just fooling. What are we doing? But that you're introducing that variable into the steps. It's kind of like when we say, I ask a guy, don't jump into any other self-help programs while we're doing this. Don't join Bible school. Don't do Russell Brand's steps. Don't go down and join the mankind and introduce something that muddies our thing up here. And there really just isn't a bigger distraction in the world than a relationship when you're doing this work.
Biggest trigger too.
Yeah, and there is, and that's how many times over and over and over again do I hear from my sponsees talking about their sponsees because all they do is bitch about him or her. That's just all the time, like you said, you had to set some limits to it. There's some value in letting somebody vent and discharge, and we promote that. I want you to be able to get your shit off your back, but there's a limit to how much, like you said, there's a limit to how much of that I'm going to hear. And then there's going to be a limit at some point where if this is not getting any better and you're doing nothing to change it, I'm going to have a problem with that. I'm going to hit my limit where I just either don't want to hear it anymore, or let's start planning something to change things.
And it is deadly powerful. I have a person in my group that's about to be kicked out because of the partner. And I was like, are they gone? And they're like, no. It means, you took them back. And they were completely interfering with the person getting a group, staying in group, dropping out of group during the middle of the group, out of drama. Yeah. There'd be a little chat in there about this and this happened. And I'd be like, oh, that is not important right now. You're trying to save your life. We're literally doing heart surgery on you. And you're going to get up off the operating table because of this stupid little thing over here that you think is important. Because of what? Because of the relationship. Yeah. And that's it. You are stealing from yourself.
I've seen significant others sabotage the recovery of another what will come out of their mouth is they want you to get sober, and then they will put things on this person that prohibits their recovery.
And
it's
why?
Crazy.
No, why? Because they want to get them sober. The dynamic is you got the codependent, you got the enabler, and you've got the addict. And when the addict goes over to AA or a treatment center and gets well, the enabler resents that. They've lost their job. I have lost my purpose. So they won't be aware why they're doing it or that they are doing it. They will just be doing because, that's what they do. And it's because I need that control back on. I need to know what my job is. You've taken away my job, and I resent that these people got you well where I couldn't. It's a very weird dynamic, but it's very common. All right. Hope that helps. Just talk it through with her. I do find that my sponsees can be sensible if I just explain to them and say, look, man, I hear that this thing bothers you, right? Right. And you're really obsessed with it right now. Can we agree? Right. Right. And do you like that? Nope. Good. What if I told you I can help you get rid of that? I mean, I can completely wipe it out of your mind where you won't even be thinking about it at all. Does that sound good? Yeah, that sounds like pretty good. Well, do the work with me. Come on. Just do this right here. I can get her out of your mind. I promise. I've done it 1,000 times with people. You will find a different higher power. All right. This one starts out, feel free to rephrase. So I won't rephrase it. I'll just write, what do relapses or short slips, brief periods of using, or why do relapses or short slips, brief periods of using, seem to be more common near sobriety anniversaries? I celebrated 2 years of sobriety. Great job from alcohol a couple of months ago. That's awesome. And for about 3 or 4 weeks just before and after the anniversary date, I was feeling these strong cravings for the strawberry flavored nicotine vape I have been off for over a year. I was scared of it. And I was scared that if I picked up a vape it would not be long before I caved in further and gave my brain what it really wanted, which is alcohol. There actually is a very proven scientific synergy between cigarette and vaping smoking, and now with caffeine, since they've started to add caffeine with drinks, and alcohol. Any drugs that are so opposite, you start combining them, the brain will associate one with the other. I was scared that if I gave into the nicotine craving, which sounded harmless by itself, it would not be long before I'd be drinking and looking for other drugs. I had to keep reminding myself that this disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful, and that the craving for my old vape was just a tipping point. It was mentally straining! I got through it with a lot of strawberry flavored candy and sharing the dangerous thoughts with my sponsor, my friends in recovery, and my close family. I prayed for help and it did fade away. Is there anything I could have done better? I have seen friends have relapses or slips just before and just after recovery anniversaries. What is it about these milestones that wake up and poke this beast of a disease when otherwise we would have had peace? That's a great question. So, as an old timer, there's a lot of jittery talk out there about a bogeyman named Jason, that if you go out in the woods, he's behind a tree with an axe, and there's this sound that goes, he will get you and strike you sober. Struck you sober. It'll strike you drunk. Man, I was just struck drunk one night. I don't know how it happened. That's not how it happens. There's a lot of steps that the person takes that the sponsor can usually see that they're on the path towards a relapse. Now, the only one that I think Dan agrees with me on, too, that we've seen a lot of credence behind is the 1 year anniversary, because newcomers become so obsessed with that goal that it becomes like, oh, I'm done. I'm graduated. I'm fine. And then they don't know what to do next and they relapse. That's common. I can avow that one. Some people talk about a 5-year mark. I don't know if I've seen that. I do see challenges when people's lives change or they have to move and start a new job or they get extra thoughts of using and things, but I don't think it has to do with the actual date. Having said that, I think you manage this very, very well. A distracted reward. I don't want to say that. A distractive reward, one that takes your mind off the actual reward, is absolutely great, scientifically proven things to do. If you can show your brain, ooh, shiny over here, to get it off of the obsession to want to drink, that is allowed and that is necessary. I tell all of my patients, gain 5 or 10 pounds in early recovery if you have to, just to get another day of recovery, and eat and do whatever you want. It doesn't matter right now. We are saving your life. We are in triage trying to stop the bleeding, and you gaining a few pounds don't matter. So have a little sugar over here if it helps you not think about drinking. And we know there's a lot of sugar in alcohol. Talked to one of the nurses about that today. It's actually alcohol sugar, which is worse for your liver than other types of sugars. So substitute rewards work very well. You did excellent. I think that was great. And you got through it. You prayed. You kept your sponsor in the loop, which is our number one tool. Talk. You got to talk to somebody. You got to get it out. If you keep it alone and you nurture that, it will grow like mold in your basement and take over your house. Do not stay alone with your cravings. I don't care how small it is. Tell on yourself. And it went away, as you said. But I don't know if there's any set dates, the 7-year itch, as the old phrase goes. It is scientifically proven that if you pass 5 years, that's considered long-term recovery because the rates of relapse go down to nothing. So if you imagine a bell graph, you've got this huge spike in relapses in the first 90 days. The majority of relapse occurs in that first 90 days. Why? Because your brain is sick. It's on autopilot. And if you don't put all of your energy and intentions towards just staying sober and getting your head to pillow sober that night, you are going to fall. Your brain is operating beyond your control. It's normal to use now. So we're changing that. And every action you take is rewiring that circuitry. If you're not going to any meetings, you're not doing anything new, you haven't done a damn thing to change that. So when you go back to work out of treatment, you're going to relapse. You haven't changed your brain. Then we sort of level off and it's sort of spiking a little bit. But at 5 years, it literally drops off to nothing. And we do hear stories of people relapsing with long-term recovery. But what is the common phrase? You will hear at every meeting. I stopped doing what was working. We are the most idiotic people when it comes to drugs and alcohol. We are smart as whips in every other area. I wouldn't want to try to outfox another alcoholic or addict. But I'm telling you, we are dumber than rocks when it comes to seeing relapse and seeing that I'm getting slippery. We just can't. And so they end up not doing the things that was working. That's like, well, I'm on blood pressure medication. And then one day I just stopped taking it because I just don't think I need it. And then I'm in that ER because my fucking pulse is out of whack. It's idiotic, right? You would think, well, that's stupid. Why'd you stop taking it? Oh my God, we see this all the time. Where addicts stop doing what was working. Can you say that they've graduated? You can say that the ego comes back. Yeah, but I think it's that, pulling away from the sponsor seems the biggest part. You know, if you're not going to your home group, if you don't have a home group where the people see you every week, get to know you. And if you're not accountable to somebody you're talking to at least a few times a week, hopefully every day, you're freewheeling and you've taken your free will back. And that's the opposite of what we do in recovery. You've got to allow your support group, your sponsor and your higher power have the wheel of your life. And everything goes better. You get everything you need. You get everything you want. You're safe and protected. Why would you give that up? Because the ego's a crazy animal. It's never fully destroyed. I'll say one last word and get Dan in here. My old sponsor, Burns Brady, said the ego arises unscathed. Directly from the big book. I never really caught that phrase till he repeated it like 3 times in a row at a meeting one night. And I suddenly clicked. And I remember that old movie, War of the Worlds. You remember the old one, not the Tom Cruise one. I'm talking about the ones where the spaceships were going, and they said, we can't stop them. We've tried everything. We're going to have to do a nuclear bomb. And they drop a nuclear bomb on that thing, and they're looking through the binoculars, and they're going, I can't see. There's so much smoke. We're looking if it's still there. I think it's gone. Oh, my God. And the thing's going, and I get it. The ego arises unscathed. No matter how much step work I do, no matter how humble I think I am, all of a sudden that control and self-will, and I'm taking the power back, has been the eternal struggle for me as a person in recovery. And I've also seen it as the number one thing that causes people with long-term recovery to fail. Remember, in early recovery, your brain ain't right. That's it. But when you get your brain right, stop doing what's working. What kind of idiot would do that? What kind of idiot stops going to meetings? A lot. I run into a lot of people. You still go to meetings? Nah.
All they do is talk about drinking.
Right? Right? Or maybe they have a bar in their house to serve their friends when they come over, right? So, any thoughts on that, Dan? I just like that picture, though. It's undefeatable. The human ego will always try to arise, and I got to temper that thing with some tools every day, man, and just say, all right, My old sponsor, Burns Bray, used to do the first 3 steps before he got out of bed in the morning. It was brilliant. He would say, okay, Burns, you're going to try. There's going to be a lot of shit that's going to happen today that you're going to be powerless over. And you won't be able to manage it, but you're going to want to manage it because you're going to want it to go your way. So you're going to go out there and you're going to start to fix, control, manage, and exert your power. And you're going to forget all about God and forget all about your groups. And you're going to exert that power and you're going to step on the toes of your fellow and you're going to do damage and you're going to hurt a lot of people. So before you get out of this freaking bed, why don't you reach up and take the hand of your higher power and seek that partnership to walk with him today or her or whatever it is. And you will probably fare better to not hurt people and take that control of management back. Brilliant. What a great practice to do that every morning before you got out of bed.
I've been doing it for 9.5 years, Stu, and who I heard it from was Brother Luke. I wasn't planning, I was on home incarceration and I couldn't just go where I wanted to, but you said, hey, if there's any way you could get your schedule changed where you could come see this guy talk, you ought to do that. And I didn't, you don't ever want to call them people, but I did. And they said, sure. And they let me go to that meeting. And I heard Brother Luke say he does first, second, third step prayer in the morning before he gets out of bed. And it just rang in my ears. And I went home and Googled prayers and cut and pasted them onto a piece of 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and taped it to the dresser on my side of the bed so that I would remember in the morning, because when I got up in the morning, I would forget to do prayers. I would get up in my old habits and I would just shoot out. So I hung that prayer on my dresser. And it's still the prayer that I use when I first wake up today, every day. And that's more conversational. But again, why stop doing what's working, right? Just like you said, why would I change that today? I wake up from a nap and that prayer plays in my head, and it's almost a little maybe too automatic, but it's working, so I'm not messing with it. As far as this guy doing something different, I think he did exactly what the prescription would call for. I don't know that there's a thing in there. This stuff is going to happen. It's going to sneak up on you, and it falls under cunning, baffling, and powerful. Not a word, not a moment. I can't really think of the last time that I was seriously tempted, though, I can't remember the last time that I thought that a chemical solution would be the what I needed right now. And at a couple years sober, that's still, like you said, in my mind now. I wouldn't have said that when I was 2 years sober, but now that's still early recovery, man. I mean, of course. Some people say those post-acute withdrawal symptom stuff goes out into the couple-year mark for some people. So, it's true. And we just use the tools we have and do what works. That's exactly what he did. If somebody come to ask me what you do when that happens, you do what that feller did, or gal, or guy or gal, whichever one, what they did. Perfect. And it worked. And it worked, didn't it?
It did. It did. And they're still sober. That's the main point.
Yep.
Main goal is just staying sober, even if it wasn't pretty.
And you hear that once in a while. A guy will come and he's a couple, 2, 3 years sober, and he's a little flipped out because he was drinking entered his mind again, Like, dude, you need to prepare for that to happen the rest of your life at some level. You need to be prepared for that to happen, because that's deep in there. And, what happens is it become less and less and less. But just because I said a minute ago, I don't remember the last time, the next time might be tomorrow. I don't know. But I know exactly what to do when that pops up. I know exactly what to do.
That's when we're talking about spirituality. That's kind of the goal of recovery overall. And I'm telling you all this from a perspective of 40 years. To fully accept who and what I am and not apologize or be ashamed of it. If you look at the science and say, okay, biologically I was wired at birth this way, so that means my higher power made me this way. So, and I have this purpose now today because I am wired that way and I'm sober and I can help save other lives. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
And yet I will find people who find their recovery through a church or some other method, and they'll talk about it like I don't sin anymore.
Yeah.
And this is a flaw that I had, and I'm not a sinner. And I go, well, sounds like you're not okay with being an alcoholic anymore. And today, and it took me a while, folks, I will tell you, I really came to this in the past 5 to 10 years. Don't wait as long as I. But now today, if I have a thought about using, I laugh.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm like, of course I want to use. I'm an addict. Duh.
Yeah.
Duh. And I'll do that to myself just to make myself laugh, because it's like, I find people who fight that, they get into trouble. I'm not supposed to be, I'm a bad dog. I'm a bad dog thinking about heroin. I'm a bad dog. It's like, you stupid idiot.
Yeah.
Of course you're thinking about that $100 bills they left on the table. The first thought was, I'm going to grab that. You know how many years you trained yourself to do that? Of course you got that criminal mind. Just don't do it.
Right. Yeah.
That's the miracle, is I can have that intention and then an impulse, and I don't actually freaking do it. I remember the day my mom sent me to the freaking pharmacy to pick up her pain meds, and I was like, I got to see what she's getting. I got to see what she's getting. I couldn't resist. I just had to say, how much is she getting? What's she getting? And I looked. I said, all right, that's enough. And I laughed. And I put it on the seat, and I left it alone. And I delivered it in one piece to her. Wasn't even opened.
Yeah.
So that's acceptance. That's peace. That's true freedom. And I don't think Bill Wilson said any other example. He never said that we should deny. In fact, he said your worst things that happen to you will be your greatest assets to help save lives. So I hope all of you, I pray that for you, that you'll reach that point one day where you can laugh when you have a thought about getting high.
Yeah, and something I forgot to say when we were talking about, since we brought the spirituality, because it really is all rooted on that. How many times, I can think of maybe a half dozen times of when a pastor has come and visited our meeting and has, like for birthday night, one of their congregation is celebrating. And this phrase, I've heard it a number of times. They said, wow, that's right here. This is what church is supposed to be like.
I can back that up since you mentioned our good friend, Brother Luke. Brother Luke has been at the Trappist Monastery, which I believe is the second oldest monastery in North America, down in Bardstown, Kentucky, outside Louisville. It was founded in 1849. And he was the second oldest living monk. I believe now he's the oldest living monk that's been there the longest. And he will come to our meetings, and he'll say straight out, he says, I found my spirituality in AA. And he says, and you have to realize, guys, I love my faith. My faith means I dedicated my whole life. I gave up everything to live this ascetic lifestyle where I don't even eat these good foods. I don't even have all the pleasures you all have because I'm dedicated. We get up at 3 a.m. and we say Vespers, which is prayers and singing. And we're dedicated to this life to help heal the world.
Yep.
And yet he found his spirituality through the 12 steps.
Yep, that really rocked me.
That's a freaking testimony right there, in my opinion.
Yep, no doubt. And I heard, that night I heard him talk. Those are the two things that still stick to today. The first, second, third step prayer, and that he found it with all the spiritual, religious, whatever label you want to put on it, training that he has had and practices, that he found his true spirituality when he came to Alcoholics Anonymous.
Bill says in the big book, when people come, they're astonished to find out we're not witch burners, which means we're not like stick up our ass. That's just everybody that drinks is an asshole and they shouldn't be doing it. We don't even care. We care about what we're doing. And I frankly believe that's the best teachers. The teachers are the ones with clay feet. I want an angel with clay feet. I can't learn from an angel. They're too perfect. I want an angel who's a screw up, just like me. And so when I tell my newcomer about slipping and getting mad one day or making a mistake or wanting to use, I'm including them closer to my journey so they can feel like they can reveal their own flaws, because I'm not so damn on a pedestal. I personally believe, and my teachers have taught me, Jesus did everything for a specific purpose. Think of him as one of the most advanced teachers that ever walked the earth. He could actually work these principles better than anybody when it comes to plugging into that power. And when he had his meltdown at the market for the money lenders, that was a lesson in being human, that even Jesus loses his mind every now and then. When he had his moment of doubt on the cross, you all think that was random? You think that's just part of the story that wasn't meant to happen? Do you really think Jesus had a moment of doubt that he wasn't going to his Father? Or was that another lesson that he was teaching on his deathbed? That it's okay to have doubt, which Brother Luke agrees with 100%, and which his guy, Thomas Merton, the great writer and philosopher that has tons of books and started down in Gethsemane. He's from Gethsemane. He said, you can't have faith without doubt. That was one of his great quotes. So basically the whole theme of this podcast has been opening up your mind. Let's open up our thoughts. Let's go down the new path. Let's drop the acid, try something, go on the journey, and you will not be disappointed, I promise. Okay? When your spirit feels the impulse, order that book on Amazon. When your spirit feels the impulse, download and listen to that podcast or that talk on YouTube. Start incorporating new information and go on your journey to find your own spirituality. Reclaim it because it was stolen from you. So thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate you. I know it was an extra size, big size one today, but that spirituality topic gets me and Dan going, and we could go for hours. We won't do that to you here. But thank you for joining us, and please keep coming. One last request, as we say all the time, please like, subscribe. Any comments, I'd love to hear from you in the comments, but that helps us get our analyticals up so that we can get seen on YouTube. Right now we're buried under a ton of other content. So please do what you could to just help us raise up our profile so that we can help more people. And that's what this is all about. All right. We'd like to close this with the Serenity Prayer, as we do with every meeting, most meetings around the world. And Dan, if you want to join me, prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Just for today. Keep coming back. It works if you work it, and you die if you don't. Woo! See you next time. Bye-bye.